Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenauer, and we have a terrific episode ahead of us today. Hope everyone's week was good and everyone was able to ease their way back into the work week after the holiday weekend. A lot of things have been going on in the baseball world the last few days, so we're going to get into it today and have a lot to cover, but we also have some news on not just Major League Baseball, but also minor league baseball and what all is going on with the affiliate teams, but I'll dive into what we will be covering today. So first, I'll get into, again, another recap of games from Tuesday, September 8th, and we'll also go around the league giving updates on teams' records and how their playoff hopes look with less than, 30 games to play until the postseason. Afterwards, I'll discuss the biggest wild card watchers and which teams are right now on the outside looking in for the playoffs, but could meander their way into the postseason by taking the final wild card spots for the playoffs. I'll then get into a discussion on the minor leagues and what all is going on with the MILB and how this pandemic could affect the future of the minors and how it's already affected it in some ways. And be sure to stick around for the final segment today, as I will share my most underrated baseball players in the league, which players seem to always perform very well yet are never really talked about, and especially what kind of seasons they've been having this year. So I'm going to dive right into some game recaps from Tuesday, September 8th. A lot of things have been going on in baseball, and again, like I mentioned, with baseball now under that 30-game mark, with not even a month left in the season, really, because the season will be over by the end of September. So we're very, very close to the playoffs, right around the corner, and things are really starting to heat up for some teams in the league. So I'll jump right into it. First game, Tigers and Brewers. Tigers taking this one 8-3. Brewers really struggling. They've really struggled the last few games. They did put up 3 runs in the top of the ninth, tried to make some sort of a comeback, but it was a 5-run bottom 5th inning for the Detroit Tigers that really propelled them into their win against the Milwaukee Brewers. Heimer Candelario had 4 RBIs. He's been playing very well, hitting above 300 this year. 5 home runs for him. A really nice bat in the lineup, especially for this Tigers team that's 19-21. They are knocking on the door for the playoffs, and they could really see themselves potentially make a little bit of a leap if they're able to get a couple more wins down the road and throughout the rest of the season. We could possibly see them maybe knocking off a team or two in the wild card and taking their first playoffs their first playoff appearance in quite some time. So great win for Detroit. Milwaukee moves to 18-22. Again, they're another team that is right on the cusp of making the playoffs, but it's going to take a lot of solid baseball and really almost nearly perfect baseball to be played the rest of the season for Milwaukee if they really want to have a legitimate shot at making it into the postseason, because an 18-22 record right now, sitting in third place in the NL Central, about 2-3 spots outside of that last 8th spot for the playoffs. It's going to take a lot for them to really find themselves in a strong, good, solid playoff position come the end of September, early October. So next 2 games, they were a doubleheader. First one coming against the Twins and Cardinals. Twins taking this one 7-3. Twins scoring 3 runs in the top of the first, and then 1 in the top of the fourth and 1 in the top of the fifth. St. Louis did put up 3 in the bottom of the sixth, but then Minnesota tacking on 2 more insurance runs at the top of the seventh, and that was pretty much all she wrote for the Cardinals. Twins now move to 27-17, so they're having a really good year this year. They have fallen out of first place. The Indians and the Indians and the White Sox have now started to try and have really laid their claim to that AL Central. But don't discredit the Twins. Don't discount the Twins, because Minnesota is a very good team. They've got a lot of really good players, some really good pitchers also. They're they're a very well-balanced team, and I don't think people really notice that, mainly because Nelson Cruz, who, again, hit another home run on Tuesday, he's been an absolute highlight and a half for this Twins team, especially with how well he's been hitting at the age of 40 years old. Jose Barrios did get the win against the Cardinals in that first of 2 games. He moves to 4-3 on the season. Again, he still has a 4.40 ERA, and a lot of other guys on this team, I think, Maida, he's a very good pitcher. He's got about a 2.27 ERA, 2.3 ERA. Randy Dobnak, who we'll hear about more later on in the show, I think he's one of the most unsung heroes, not only on that team, but really in the entire AL. I mean, he's a very good pitcher who's been very efficient for them, and he's done a lot of really, really good stuff so far this season. And quite frankly, he could take that ace position from Barrios. I know Barrios is supposed to be the ace on this Twins team, but Dobnak's been putting up numbers to argue that and to really make a claim and make a case for him being the ace on this team. So come playoff time, it'll be very interesting to see if Barrios is able to, turn it up a notch, or if it's going to be Dobnak who's going to be taking the reins as the ace for the Twins. Miguel Sano had a 2-run home run as well, so, good thing that he's starting to get the bat going a little bit as we near into the playoff time, because they're going to need everything. They're going to need everything and more come, the beginning of October, if they want to find themselves in a legitimate spot and not getting bounced out of the first round of the playoffs, which has been a constant theme for them the last couple years. And I really do think this Twins team could make a legitimate run deep into the playoffs if they've got everybody performing the way they're supposed to, but it's going to take a lot more than just Nelson Cruz hitting home runs. It's going to be Jorge Polanco producing. It's going to be Miguel Sano producing. It's going to be guys like Max Kepler, Mitch Garver, a guy that I'm a big fan of. I'm a huge fan of Mitch Garver. I think he's a very good catcher. I know he has not been playing great this year, but he's still a piece that I think, come playoff time could, see a lot more production from the plate and really start to produce for this Twins team. In the second game, Cardinals bounced back and defeated the Twins 6-4, and Minnesota scored the first 2 runs of the game, but again, St. Louis scoring 5 in the bottom of the 3rd inning, and then Minnesota scoring a run at the top of the 5th. St. Louis adding another run in the bottom of the 6th that's really proved to put this one out of reach. Minnesota was able to tack on one more run at the top of the 7th, but again, that was all she wrote for the Twins. They now move to 27-18 after that game, and the Cardinals are now 18-17, right there in second place in the NL Central, which is arguably the worst division in baseball. They're in a nice spot. They're in a nice position, even though they have not played as many games as other teams have. They still have, I think the makings of being a good, solid playoff team. I mean, it's the St. Louis Cardinals, right? They always find a way. They always are, that team that come playoff time, come postseason time, they really ratchet it up a little bit, and they really, get the ball rolling a little bit. So hopefully the Cardinals can keep hold of that second place spot, but if not, look to see teams like the Milwaukee Brewers try and knock them out of that second place position and move themselves up a little bit in the division. Next game, Red Sox Phillies, and this was another doubleheader. The first game, Phillies winning 6-5. Don't discount Philadelphia either, because Philadelphia has played much better baseball as of late. They are really starting to separate themselves from the New York Mets, who I think as we get into September and further into the month, they might start to digress a little bit, and we'll start to see the Phillies ascend a little bit more. And I'm not going to say that the Braves are completely, huge steps ahead of the Phillies in the division. I do think that the Phillies, if they were to play perfect baseball, and they're going to have to get some help from the Braves if they want to find themselves in that first place spot. I think that the Braves have a good, solid, hold in that first place spot. But I do think that the Phillies could make a run and could make a case to taking that first place position from Atlanta. Philadelphia scoring 1 run in the bottom of the 2nd and then 3 in the bottom of the 3rd. And then Boston was able to put up 1 run in the top of the 3rd, but back-to-back 2-run innings for Boston in the 5th and the 6th, and then Philadelphia able to walk off in the bottom of the 7th. And it was Alec Baum who hit the walk-off, and he also had 4 RBI game, so very good game from Baum. Rafael Devers did have a 3-hit game, so good for, Devers to finally get things going from the plate for himself, because he has really been struggling this year. And it's a good sign for, Boston moving into next year, because I'm sure they've probably written off this year as kind of a throwaway season. I mean, they're 14-29. Actually, in this next game that we'll get into, they're now 15-29 after they defeated the Phillies 5-2, so they split the doubleheader. Devers going into next year, I think, is going to be really good. I think where he's going to use this year possibly as kind of, I don't want to say a year of growth or development because he really hasn't taken a step forward, but I think that he's going to use this as a building block. He's going to take this with, I don't want to say a grain of salt either, because I'm sure he's going to really try and capitalize on this rough year he's had and try and come back next year better than ever and, really bounce back in 2021, because I do think he is one of the best young stars in baseball. I mean, 25 and under baseball players, you have to put Devers in that conversation. So we'll look to see the Red Sox possibly be better next year, because they're completely out of it this season. They would literally need 3 or 4 teams to have a catastrophic meltdown in the last 2.5 weeks of the season, and they would have to play perfect baseball, not near perfect baseball, but perfect baseball. But a good bounce back win for the Red Sox in that Game 2 of the doubleheader. Philadelphia scoring the first 2 runs in the bottom of the first, but then Boston scoring 1 run in the top of the second and 1 in the top of the fourth. Then they also put up 2 runs in the top of the sixth and then 1 in the top of the seventh. So they did a really nice job of capitalizing when they had to and scoring runs late in the game, also making sure that they put that one out of reach against the Phillies. Bobby Dahlbeck had home runs. He drove in 3 runs for the Red Sox. Really big day for him. He had actually a 2-run go-ahead home run that was able to put this one out of reach against the Philadelphia Phillies. So great bounce-back win from Boston. Moving into the next game, Rays-Nationals. This was a really good one. Nationals winning 5-3. Nationals loaded the bases many times against the Rays. They did a really nice job getting guys on base, moving them over. I will say, though, the Rays showed their ability as a team to strategically move guys over. I can't remember who it was, but he got on just an infield single essentially, and then literally the first pitch that the pitcher threw the next at bat, the guy took off and he stole second. So just like that, in a matter of 3-4 pitches, now all of a sudden they had a guy on second. So they showed the danger that they bring to every single game that they play, because they are that good at scoring runs. They're that talented at moving guys around strategically and setting their team up for a good solid opportunity to score runs. Washington scored the first run of the game in the bottom of the first and then put on another run in the bottom of the second and 2 in the bottom of the third. Tampa Bay did put up 3 in the top of the sixth. They did knock at the door a little bit. They tried to make a little bit of a comeback. Washington put up 1 run in the bottom of the sixth that proved to be the insurance run for them. Yarborough got the loss for the Rays. He's now 0-3 on the year, and he's a guy that a lot of people are touting as kind of the next big thing in that Rays organization, him and Glasnow as 2 of the better young pitchers for Tampa Bay. Anibal Sanchez for the Nationals starting to kind of wake up a little bit, improve his stock a little bit. He was earlier this year throwing, I want to say he was above a 15 ERA. It was something astronomical that was out. I couldn't even believe that he was a starting pitcher in the MLB and he had that high of an ERA, but he's dwindled it down to 6.34, still not very good, but a big improvement. He's 2-4 on the year now after that win. Juan Soto, he's been playing much better. Look to see Juan Soto in the next couple years. Also, I know I just talked about Rafael Devers, but look to see Juan Soto be in that conversation and in that mix of top-tier 25 and under baseball players who we could potentially see be the face of baseball. I could really see Devers, Tatis, and Soto, all 3, be the face of baseball in the next 5-6 years and be the names that we hear all the time. We're going to start hearing those names 24/7. Nationals having not a great year this year, 16-25. So again, like the Red Sox, they're probably completely out of it. The Rays, though, 28-15, first place in that AL East, and they have really put on a show this season. I mean, they have really proved that, they are better than the Yankees this season. I can't believe I'm saying that, but the Yankees, and I had this conversation with a couple friends the other day, and they asked me, who's the best team in baseball? And if the Yankees are healthy, you can make a legitimate claim that they're the best team in baseball. This year, I would have to say it's probably the Dodgers, and then probably a close second, maybe the Padres, or maybe, say, a team like the White Sox or the Indians. Even the Athletics. I mean, you could even make a case for the Athletics. Those are, 4 or 5 very dominant teams this year. But right now, the Yankees, they are not looking like a top-tier baseball team. I mean, they have struggled mightily lately, and they've now been, leaped over by the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays are sitting in second place in the AL East, and we could see a very interesting AL East picture with the Rays and the Blue Jays being the top 2 teams in that division, with the Yankees and the Red Sox kind of floating around the bottom. Now, the Red Sox are completely in the bottom, but the Yankees, if they keep slipping and they keep performing the way they've been performing, look to see them possibly get leapt over by the Orioles. I could really see that also happening too. The Orioles, I mean, they're knocking at the door for the playoffs, and we'll hear about them later on in the show. They could also make a big run for the postseason as well. So next game, Kansas City against Cleveland. Cleveland losing 8-6 to the Royals. Cleveland scoring the first 3 runs of the game, going up 3-0 going into the third inning, but Kansas City was able to tie it up at 3 in the top of the third. They put up 3 runs in that top third inning, and then in the bottom third, Cleveland was able to put on 2 more runs. So now going into the fourth inning, 5-3, Royals were able to put on a string of runs in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, 2 in the 7th, 2 in the 8th, and 1 in the 9th. Really nice job by Kansas City, scoring those runs later on in the game, and I talk about it a lot. Being able to not just spread out your offense throughout an entire game, but being able to put up 5 runs in the last 3 innings of a baseball game, that's really hard to do, especially when you're either tied or you're at a deficit. Being able to kind of come back and get out of the hole that you've dug for yourself earlier in the game, that shows a lot to not only an opponent, but just fans and viewers and people in the baseball community that, hey, you know what, even though that we've got our backs against the wall, we're able to still strike, and we're able to, pull ourselves out of that position and ultimately win the game. I mean, Kansas City came out and won by 2 runs, and they were going into those innings, tied or losing. So a really nice job by Kansas City. Merrifield was a big part of that comeback, and we'll hear a lot about Whit Merrifield later on. Carlos Santana had a 2-run home run, so he's starting to get the bat going. But, I mean, again, Merrifield having a 3-run home run day, he's one of the most underrated baseball players in baseball. I don't know why he's not talked about more, but he should be talked about much more because he is very good. And again, proved it last night, on Tuesday. So really nice job by Merrifield. Francisco Lindor also had a 2-run homer. So, big offense for the Indians, but the Royals were able to spread it out a little bit more. Indians moved to 26-16, while the Royals are 15-28, so they are way out of it. Next game, another doubleheader, this one between the Athletics and the Astros. First game went to the Athletics, 4-2. And then in the second game, the Astros bounced back and won 5-4. In the first game, a lot of 2-run spots for these two teams. Oakland scoring 2 in the top of the third, and then the Astros scoring 2 in the bottom of the fifth, and then Oakland Athletics scoring 2 again in the top of the sixth. So very spread out there. Again, Zach Greinke getting his first loss of the year. He's moving to 3-1 on the season, 3.27 ERA. Chris Davis for the Athletics had a solo home run. Robbie Grossman's RBI single was also huge for the Athletics. They're now 25-14. They're getting a lot of help from their lineup finally. Having Chris Davis starting to hit a little bit better. Matt Chapman has been turning things around slowly. Same with Matt Olson. They've got guys that are going to be dangerous, and I feel like the Athletics, they've been talked about a lot, but I think people are going to forget about them come postseason time, and they might, really shake things up in the AL. They might find themselves moving past the ALDS. They might go into the ALCS, which again, that would be a very interesting playoff situation, having a team that you never really see in that scenario really in quite some time. So hopefully the Athletics can keep on this roll that they're on right now. The Astros, after those 2 games, moved to 22-21. So again, they're right around 500. I know I earlier in a couple episodes ago said that they would not make the playoffs. They probably will, but I would not be shocked if they got ousted by somebody. I would not be shocked if they started to slip a little bit. And as we can see, their team is not nearly as good when they're not able to share the signs with each other. So, and I don't mean to bring that up, but I mean, it's pretty obvious. Jose Altuve's numbers are not the same as they were last year. Same thing with Bregman. Bregman's numbers are nowhere near what they were last year. So it's clear that the sign stealing was working, and it definitely helped out their playing and their performance. Now they don't have that, and it's starting to show. So we'll see and it's going to be a big, can they bounce back from all of those scandals? Can they make a comeback, and can they almost change their the perception that they have and the reputation they have in the MLB? And it would show a lot of fortitude by the Astros. Hey, we're going to fight through all of this. We're going to get over it, and we're going to still make the playoffs this year. But again, I'm not a huge Astros guy, especially after all that went on. But again, as a result, you have to give them credit. They're still above 500, and they will probably make the playoffs. But again, would not be shocked if they didn't. Next game, Yankees Blue Jays. Blue Jays winning 2-1, and the Blue Jays a couple games ago put up a 10-run spot in one of their innings against the Yankees, and they really put the Yankees to shame in that game. Now again, a closer one in this one, 2-1, but the Toronto Blue Jays have been playing very good baseball as of late. Teoscar Hernandez has been playing out of his mind. Bo Bichette's been having a good year. He's been in and out of the lineup with some injuries, though, but they've got a lot of really good pieces. They added Robbie Ray in the trade deadline, so we'll see if that starts to pan out for them well. On the mound, Hyun Jin Ryu has played very well. He's pitched really, really good for the Jays as well. Toronto scored the first 2 runs of the game in the bottom of the second, really the only runs that were scored by Toronto, and then New York's put on 1 run in the top of the 5th, but great defense by Toronto to hold the Yankees to no other runs. Only 1 run the entire game, especially for an offensive team like the Yankees. Now, they have had a lot of injuries, and they've had a lot of guys out of the lineup lately. So, again, we'll maybe start to see them slip a little bit, or once they get those guys back, maybe we'll start to see them climb back up in that AL East and maybe get their first place position back. Jonathan Davis had a huge 2-run home run for the Blue Jays that really, proved to be the reason why they won. So great win for the Blue Jays, moving to 24-18 on the year, while the Yankees are an even 21-21. So now right at 500, a position that the Yankees have not really seen themselves in the last couple years. So it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back and respond to this. Essentially, you can look at it as their record 0-0. They've got a brand new season these next 2.5, 3 weeks, and it's just going to really their season is going to be dependent upon how these last couple weeks go, because they could still find themselves in a playoff spot, but they could possibly find themselves in not as high of a playoff spot as they would, originally earlier on in the season. So we'll see if the Yankees are able to pull themselves out of that and keep on that playoff trend that they're on right now. Next game, Pirates-White Sox, and a surprising Pirates win, 5-4 over Chicago. Chicago moving to 26-16 now, where the Pirates are a dismal, and I mean a dismal 14-26. And I know there's a lot of other teams in this league that do not have great win totals like the Pirates, but I could argue that the Pirates are the worst team in baseball. And I've said that many times, and I hate to say that because, I live in Pittsburgh. I have a lot of friends that are Pirates fans, a lot of family that are Pirates fans, but the overall consensus is this team is just not good. And a lot of people actually, I was seeing the other day, comparing the Pirates to the White Sox in terms of what the Pirates should do, what kind of playbook they should follow, what kind of trend they should follow, and they should follow how the White Sox have done it. They've traded for pieces, they've built inside of the organization, they've really started to do a nice job at growing in-house talent, as we see, Nick Madrigal, he's a guy who's come up through the organization, and he's played very, very well. Jose Abreu, Tim Anderson, other guys, I know they got Tim Anderson from Seattle a couple years ago, but Jose Abreu, he's been a really nice spot for them, and having Dallas Keuchel on the mound, that always helps out, right? So great that the White Sox are able to get help not just from the plate but also from the mound. The White Sox scored the first 3 runs of the game in the top of the 5th, but then Pittsburgh scored 2 in the bottom of the 5th, and then they put up 2 more in the bottom of the 8th, and then they actually walked off in the bottom of the 9th inning. So really big a win by the Pirates. Jacob Stalling had a huge RBI double. Eric Gonzalez had an RBI single for the Pirates. Kevin Newman also had another huge hit. So some really positive things for the Pirates. Again, that's just one game, so you can't really feed too much into that. But again, some bright spots for the Pittsburgh Pirates, who I think could unload a lot of people this offseason, try and keep those core guys, and then build for the future. This might be a different Pirates team in the next 5-6 years if they were to do that. Next game, Orioles-Mets. Orioles winning in complete domination, 11-2 over New York. Baltimore put up 2 runs in the second, 2 in the third, 1 in the fourth, and then 4 in the fifth, and then 2 in the eighth. So again, very spread out, really good offense for the Orioles, who've been awesome offensively all year long. So really, really nice job by them. But again, it's going to come from their not just their hitting, but their pitching. How will their pitching, play out this next couple games? Because their pitching hasn't been awful, but it hasn't been great. It's the hitting that has been clearly the favorite. So if they're able to still get Santander and Alberto and Nunez still hitting well these next couple weeks, the Orioles might find themselves in the playoffs. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but they really could actually find themselves playing in the playoffs. Next game, Marlins-Braves. Marlins winning 8-0. Marlins they're doing everything they can to make it to the playoffs. They are right there. They're right at that 8th spot, that 7th spot in the playoffs, 19-18 right now, so they're above 500 record, and beating a division leader and a division rival in the Braves 8-0, really good stuff. A run was scored in the 2nd, the 3rd, 3 in the 4th, 1 in the 7th, and then 2 in the 9th for Miami. So again, some spread out offense for the Fish, which come playoff time, that's going to really help them out. That's going to really help their cause a little bit, and it could ultimately, lead them to, maybe winning a series. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but with how surprising this year has been, and with all of the shocks that have been going on in the MLB this year, I would not be shocked if we saw the Marlins win a playoff series. I really would not be shocked. But again, that would probably be a little bit of a long shot, but I could see it maybe happening. So the next game, Angels-Rangers. Rangers winning 7-1, moving to 14-27, while the Angels are 17-26. Lance Lynn had another solid outing for the Rangers. He's been unbelievable all year long. 5-2 on the year, 2.52 ERA. A lot of rumors were going around come trade deadline time that he was going to get moved, and they wanted no part in that conversation. They wanted to keep him because really he's been honestly the brightest spot on this Rangers team. Elvis Andrus hit a solo home run for the Rangers. Jared Walsh did hit a solo home run for the Angels, the only run the Angels would score. And the Angels, again, another very disappointing year, a team that I thought was going to be very good this season, but really have not panned out the way that I thought, and I think many other people thought that they were going to be. But Anthony Rendon, he's picked it up. He's definitely started to turn things around, and he's improved his play as of recently, starting to hit above 300, above 290, somewhere in that area, which was a totally different story about 35, 40 games ago where he was hitting under 200. So good thing that they've got him for a couple years, and they could maybe start to develop some talent in the organization, maybe get another piece. And if Shohei Ohtani comes back next year healthy, they've got Trout, they've got Rendon, and they've got Ohtani. They could be pretty good. But they're going to have to, not perform the way that they've performed this year, which is clearly, not playoff caliber baseball at all. Next game, Reds-Cubs. Cubs winning 3-0 over the Reds. Cubs moving to 25-18. Again, the Reds are just so disappointing this year. Only 2 runs were scored in the 2nd and 1 in the 3rd for Chicago. Pretty, lackluster offense the rest of the way. No runs were scored from the 4th to the 9th inning. Cubs doing it how they've done all year long. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy. Javi Baez did hit a triple that did score a run, but it's nothing glamorous, right? It's nothing that is oohing and aahing, if you will, that the Cubs have done all year long. 25-18, and you don't really hear a whole lot about Chicago, which is kind of shocking because I think a lot of it does come from, San Diego's been so good in the NL that they get a lot of the spotlight, and the Cubs, they're in the worst division arguably in baseball, and they're leading that division. So some people might say, well, if you put them in another division, well, they're not in another division. So I think you should give them credit where credit is due because they've been playing well, and the Reds, just as disappointing as they've been, they could make a little run towards the playoffs. They could make a push if they can, flip that 18-24 record around into, possibly if they can win the next 6 or 7 in a row. I know that is a lot to ask, but it is not completely inconceivable, especially with how we've seen a lot of teams this year very quickly turn their season around and minimize the distance and kind of the separation that other teams have, built up over them in, the last, 2-3 weeks. Teams have started to really, shrink down on that distance from teams ahead of them in just a matter of a week. All it's just 1 week. So the Reds just need that 1 week, and if it does come, then we could start having a little bit of a different conversation about the Cincinnati Reds. Next game, San Diego against Colorado Rockies. San Diego winning 14-5. San Diego, again, showing why they are the top 3, best offensive team in baseball. And quite frankly, they might be the best hitting team in baseball. San Diego scored 2 5-run innings. So 5 runs in the 1st and 5 runs in the 2nd, and then 3 in the 7th and 1 in the 3rd. Will Myers hit a huge grand slam, and he's been playing very well. Nolan Arenado had a 3-run home run. Austin Nola had a 3-run home run. He's been a huge pickup for them. He's been a really nice addition to their team. Mike Clevenger getting his first win as a Padre, moving to 2-2 on the year, 3.74 ERA. Dinelson Lamet, though, I know we talk a lot about Mike Clevenger, but Dinelson Lamet is going to be a name that people should get familiar with because come playoff time, I think it's going to be his pitching that could, push them over the edge and potentially, catapult them, further into the playoffs, beyond the NLDS into the NLCS. I'll mention this later, but I think that it's going to be the hitting that gets them to the playoffs, but it's going to be their pitching that's able to pull them further into the playoffs and push them, deep into the postseason this season if they're able to, continue to have the strong pitching that they've had. So the last game, or second to last game, I should say, Dodgers D-backs, this one finishing up in 10 innings. Arizona losing 10-9. The Dodgers scoring first run of the game, but then Arizona putting up 5 runs in the third, and then LA putting up 1 in the fifth. Arizona putting up 1 in the 6th, and then it was 4 runs in the 7th and 4 runs in the 10th by LA that was able to push them to 31-12. D-backs moved to 15-28. Diamondbacks are completely out of it, right? They're another team that's just completely out of it. And like the Padres, the Dodgers are starting to show why they're so dominant, why they're so good. Last game of the evening, Mariners-Giants. Mariners losing 5-6. Giants are now 22-21. Mariners are 19-23, and this is a perfect example of a team I was just talking about. Seattle Mariners have turned their season around in a matter of weeks, simply by just putting together, a 4-game winning streak here, a 3-game winning streak here, winning 5 of 6 here, winning 4 of 5 here, whatever it had to be, and they've completely flipped their season around. And they've done a much better job than the Angels have done, and a much better job than the Rangers have done, 2 division opponents for them, and now they find themselves in a third place position. So it's going to take just one, possible, maybe 2 little winning streaks. A couple teams start slipping up in front of them, and the Mariners are going to be in the playoffs. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but again, we're going to see a lot of interesting things this season, things that we have not seen in probably many years, mainly because of just the odd and unique season that we're in right now. So that'll do it for us in this first segment, but stay right there, folks, because after the commercial, I will get into our Wild Card Watcher segment for the day and which teams could make a run at the playoffs that are on the outside looking in currently. Folks, stay right there. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer with you all, and in our first segment, I kick things off with a recap of games from Tuesday, September 8th, some great matchups and all sorts of stuff going on around the league. Be sure to stay here with us on the GSMC Baseball Podcast for the last few minutes of the show as I'll discuss my most underrated players in baseball this year and some players who do not get the recognition they deserve for how well they play. I want to now dive into some teams that are right now on the verge of making the playoffs, but are not in the first 8, but could make a last-minute push for one of those wild card spots come October. First team I have to talk about, the Orioles. And this is a team that has been talked about more than they probably have been talked about in the last 4 to 5 years. They've been up and down in the East this season, being as high as second place and as low as fourth, but they've hovered around that 500 mark the entire time. They're currently sitting in ninth place in the playoff picture, so they are right now, again, on the outside, the outside looking in, and they're right there of making the last wild card spot, but their division rival, the New York Yankees, right ahead of them, and they have been struggling lately, most notably losing their first place foothold on the AL East to the Rays, who've been playing out of their minds lately. So the Orioles have a huge, and I mean a huge, opportunity and a huge weekend series with the Yankees. The series already starting on Thursday and going all the way till Sunday. They recently beat the Yankees 3 games out of 4 a series ago. So they are right now riding a little momentum into this series, I think. And they need to keep playing the way they have been recently against the Yankees the rest of this weekend, because this is their opportunity to gain some ground and possibly knock the Yankees out of the playoff picture. New York is very vulnerable right now, and with the Orioles power hitting combo with Hanser Alberto, who's been hitting .318 this year, Pedro Severino has 21 RBIs, he's hit .315, .897 OPS, and Anthony Santander, who has 11 homers, 32 RBIs, and an .890 OPS. The Orioles are primed for a playoff appearance, and I personally hope that they are able to pull it out. They did win 5 of 8 last week, and will also have a huge final series against the Blue Jays Rays, who are currently second in the AL East. So if they can come out on the positive end against both the Yankees and Jays and finish above 500 for their other matchups, this will be a season to remember in Baltimore and could set them up well for the next few seasons also. Next team, Seattle Mariners. I mean, this is going to sound very unusual, but the Seattle Mariners could make the playoffs. They are 2 spots out of the top 8, only a game behind the Orioles, who are in that spot ahead of them, and they recently just put together a 6-game winning streak that has helped bring their record to just 3 games under 500. And like I mentioned, teams like that, it just takes 1 week. All they need is just one really, really good week, and they need 2 teams or 1 team to kind of have a little bit of a downfall or have a little bit of a down week, and teams like the Mariners can take advantage of that. They can start to leap over these other teams, and that's the margin of error is very small this year, and as a result, we have seen it. If you were a team that, again, the Yankees, a perfect example, they started to slip, the Rays kept playing well, the Jays kept playing well, and now the Yankees are in 3rd place, and those 2 teams are ahead of them. So it just takes 1 or 2 weeks to be put together of good baseball, and then all of a sudden you have a totally different, playoff scenario, or really just an entire, division scenario of how these divisions might look. If these teams are able to put together any sort of, miraculous 1 or 2 week, 5 or 6 game winning streak or 7 or 8 game winning streak. The Mariners did just lose a vital piece to their offense in Austin Nola. They also have, no longer have slugger Daniel Vogelbach, who, again, wasn't really doing anything special for them anyways this year, as he was hitting, a low 136 from the plate. But young star Kyle Lewis has really started to put this team on his back. Although he hasn't been hitting great as of late, he still has an above 300 average. He's leading the team with 9 home runs. Kyle Seager has also been playing very well for the Mariners. He's got 30 RBIs and a 283 average with 7 home runs. Now, their team as a whole, they're not very good offensively. They do not generate a ton of runs, and their power numbers are not very high either. So if they want to find themselves in any sort of playoff picture, the bats will need to heat up. But again, they have recently put themselves into this conversation, and although they are on the outside looking in, they do have a nice view of the wild card and could take that final spot, especially with the Yankees slipping. That is a very similar situation to how the Orioles are right now. A lot of teams are just going to need the Yankees to slip up one time. 2 or 3 game losing streak, 4 or 5 game losing streak, and then we're going to start seeing teams make their move a little bit on the Yankees, and we might have a playoffs this year with no Yankees team, which would look really, really weird. The difference is, though, the Mariners only faced off against one team the rest of the season that is below 500. And with 5 of the next 6 teams that they face against, the rest of the season being winning teams, they have to put together their best ball. But they are starting to peak at the right time. I will say I do not think that they have the chance the Orioles do of making it, as they have, again, struggled against their divisional foes, especially the ones who are in 1st and 2nd place. The Athletics and the Astros have really had the Mariners' number this year. They have a combined 2 wins against the Astros and Athletics, 1 against each team, and with both of those teams having their way this season with Seattle, they'll have to turn things up a notch the last 2 series of the season if they want to make some push for the wild card spot. But again, don't discount Seattle. They could find themselves in the postseason. Next team, the Tigers. This team has been hot and then cold and then hot and then cold again all year long. Yet they still find themselves in the playoff hunt somehow. Losing Jacoby Jones will not help them in the long run trying to make a serious playoff push, as he's been one of their best hitters and one of their best overall players. But Jonathan Scoop has been picking up the slack as of late for Detroit. He's actually hitting better this year than he has in any other year of his career. He's got 22 RBIs for the second baseman. He's been huge for them with Jones out of the lineup. So far in September, though, they have not been good at all. The Tigers have gone 2-5 through their first 7 games of the month, and it's clear that during that span, the offense was not producing at all, which is pretty uncharacteristic for this team. I mean, they've been in the top 15 in hitting for most of the season, so in the better half of, the offensive production in the MLB, you would think that they would put together a couple more wins here and there. They wrap up the season with a 4-game series against the Royals, who they are 2-2 against this season. So a huge opportunity for them to close out the season with a 4-game sweep potentially. That could ultimately guide them to a playoff spot. They will have to face off against the Indians and the Twins before the final series. So it's going to be a really crucial series for them. Both series are, and they need to come out as close to 500 as possible if they want any chance to make the playoffs going into that final series against the Royals. They're only 2-3, between 2 and 3 games behind the O's and the Mariners, so they will need some help from those 2 teams, obviously, but at the same time, they will need to capitalize on those losses if that does happen. So if the O's or the Mariners start slipping, the Tigers are going to need to win a couple games. They're going to have to win 2 of 3 against the Indians. They're going to have to win 2 of 3 against the Twins. They can't afford to lose 2 of 3 against either one of those teams. And if they want to leap over those 2 teams, that is what's going to really have to happen. They're going to have to capitalize on those teams' miscues if they want to find themselves in a better playoff position. It could be a down-to-the-wire finish between these 3 teams. And even though the Tigers are the furthest from the playoffs right now, don't count them out, again, because they do have the capabilities of flipping the switch and going on a run. We have seen it this year. They have been a surprising team, one of the most surprising teams in baseball, and I would not be shocked if they kept on surprising us into October. The next team I have to talk about, now we're moving into the NL, the Colorado Rockies. Now, this is a perfect example of a team that could get the short end of the stick because of another team playing fewer games due to COVID. The Marlins are the next team in front of them, and they are occupying that final playoff spot. And the Rockies have played 5 more games than them. They do have more losses on the year than the Marlins, but they also have more wins than Miami. So again, it goes back to the fact that the Marlins have played fewer games, and because of them playing better in a few games here and there, the Rockies are on the outside looking in. That is what makes this year such an odd and peculiar year. You can have a team that has played 5 or 6 less games than the other team and still make the playoffs just simply because they were better in those 5 or 6, game difference. Now, in my opinion, this team doesn't deserve to make the playoffs, mainly because of the drastic drop-off they have had since the beginning of the year, where they found themselves in first place in the division, and now they are near the bottom and could spend, the fall sitting at home watching the Marlins compete in the playoffs. Since August 28th, the Marlins have only won 5 games, but the Rockies have not been much better since the 28th, winning only 4 games themselves. So the Rockies are currently, they're kind of struggling right now. They're kind of they have their backs against the wall, and we're going to have to see how they can respond to that. They're currently playing the Diamondbacks in a weekend series, and then they follow up that 3-game series with 2 against the Athletics, 4 games against the Dodgers, and then a 4-game series against the Giants, who are right now sitting ahead of them in the division. They finished out the season with a 4-game stand against the D-backs, so they need to win at least 3 of those games against the D-backs, being it as the only sub-500 team that they face off against the rest of the season. The Rockies' offense has been there for them this season, so it's clear that the bats have performed, but the pitching has struggled. Adding Michael Givens to the bullpen at the trade deadline, I think, can give them an added boost that they could, give them possibly a better shot at making the playoffs. But they also have to hope the Marlins start to slip up here in the middle of September if they want to find themselves playing in October. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Rockies are going to respond to such a great start in the season and to now a drastic drop-off. How are they going to finish out this 2020 year? Next team, Milwaukee Brewers, my personal favorite, but again, I don't see this happening, and I hate to say that because a couple weeks ago they were in the playoff picture, and now they are completely out of that top 8. It's going to be an interesting sight to see. I mean, if the Brewers are able to make a miraculous turnaround in just a matter of weeks, this is a team that has been known in the past to pick up the pace of play when it matters most. Just 2 years ago, they went on a crazy 20-7 run in the month of August in 2018 to eventually tie the Cubs for the division and force a game 163. But this is 2020, and the margin of error is very small, which makes the time to make up any mistakes even smaller. So they need to play near perfect baseball the rest of the season. The Brewers finished the season off with a 5-game series against the Cardinals, who they have yet to play this year, oddly enough, because of the cancellation of games that they had to deal with. I mean, that's very unique. Usually these 2 teams go at it multiple times a year, and they have yet to play each other. So again, that just adds to the weirdness and uniqueness of the 2020 season. Those are going to be some of the most important games of Milwaukee's season this year. I mean, it will also be crucial that they find themselves on the winning end in their series against the Reds, who they will play before the Cardinals, and then this upcoming series against the Cubs as well. Brewers actually have 9 more games against St. Louis. That is the team that they play the most throughout the rest of this season, which historically the Brewers have struggled against in this division, as the Cardinals usually take, the season matchup against the Milwaukee Brewers most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. And with them dropping 2 of 3 recently to the Indians, it begs the question, will Milwaukee have enough to make that playoff push? They are really going to need the hitting to show up for them. Their leader in batting average right now is Keston Hiura, who is hitting .232. .232, and that's your leading batting average leader. That is horrendous. It doesn't sound scary at all. This team from the plate with your leading average hitting, your leading batting average guy just barely above .230. They recently picked up Daniel Vogelbach and released Justin Smoke, who was hitting absolutely horribly for them this year. So Vogelbach might be the hitter they need in the lineup. He hasn't hit well this year either, but he is coming off an all-star year from last season, so he could be the piece that they need to push them into the postseason. Their pitching has been iffy. It's been okay. Not great, but it hasn't been bad. Brandon Woodruff has been their leader and ace this season for the most part, but Corbin Burns, I mentioned him a couple episodes ago, he's been putting together a huge season this year. 53 Ks, a 2.35 ERA, and a 2-0 record. He's got a very, very solid season under his belt right now, and he's dominated the last two starts as well. So if they can get that added help from their rotation, it'll be in the hands of the hitters to try and dig their way out of the hole that they have created for themselves. Next team, the New York Mets. And this team is another case of a team having an up-and-down year, and I mean really up and down. Through their first 8 games in September, they went 4-4, and before they had dropped 4 in a row, and after they had won 3 in a row. So they win 3 in a row, and then they lose 4 in a row, and then they go 4-4 over the next 8. So an incredibly hot and cold team. They have hung on the entire time, and, they have floated around that second and third spot, and even in fourth at times this season, but they're still a decent spot to, maybe make a move into the wild card if a lot of things go their way. They will first need to come out on top in their final series of the season against the last place Nationals, who they are 3-3 against this season. They have a 3-game series against the Rays and the Braves right before the final showdown against the Nationals. And those will be 2 very tough teams to face back-to-back. I mean, first you've got to face your division leader, and then you've got to face arguably the best team in the AL back-to-back. That's going to be a tough feat to conquer. New York has struggled against the Braves this year, going 2-5 against the division leaders, and they have had a hard time with the Phillies as well, who they will play before the Braves and the Rays. So 3 straight above 500 teams are going to have to come out with an above 500 record at the bare minimum. Because if they can do that, they can set themselves up well for the final series of the season. It's just going to really come down to how those, in-between series are going to, play out for them. And this Mets team, again, they have shown that they can get on a roll and that they can put together a string of wins. But it's just a matter of when. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Are they going to be able to do it at the right time? Or are they going to win 4 games in a row at the end of the season when they are 8 or 9 games out of it, when it doesn't really matter? And then people will say, well, where was that 2 weeks ago? So it's going to take a lot for them to turn this season around, and they cannot go into that matchup with the Nats having lost 8 of their last 10 or 7 of the last 11, because it'll make those games so much more important. And by that point, it might be too late if they slip up the 3 series before they play the Nationals. So I think it is unlikely, in all honesty, that the Mets will find their way into the playoffs. But I do think if they put together a string of wins and start to shift their momentum a little bit, we might have a different conversation by the end of September. So the last team that I think could make a legitimate shot and a legitimate push at the playoffs, but quite frankly is probably the longest shot of doing this, Cincinnati Reds. The last team, again, the very last team that has any sort of shot of making the playoffs. And I can't believe I'm saying that because they've had such a disappointing year this year. But again, everyone, including myself, has had expectations for them that were much higher than what they've been, performing and what they've been showing this year. I thought they were going to be a much more dominating team. I thought they were going to, if not win the division, maybe be in second, and now they're in second to last. So a very different outcome than what was originally expected for them earlier on in this season, and really earlier on in the offseason too. Like the Mets, they have been okay to start the month of September, winning 4 of their first 8 games, but losing 2 to the Pirates in a 4-game series. That should not happen, especially if you are trying to make a case for the playoffs. You cannot afford to drop 2 of 4 against the Pittsburgh Pirates. They face off against Pittsburgh in a couple weeks in a 4-game series, which they cannot afford to lose 2 or 3 of, because those 4 games are going to be very crucial for them. And if they do lose 2 or 3 of those 4, they can kiss their playoff hopes goodbye. They have the worst hitting team in baseball, and I can't believe I'm saying that, and it is incredibly shocking because they did add 2 power hitting pieces in the offseason to the lineup with Nick Castellanos and Mike Moustakas, and I'm just so shocked that I'm saying that. They have the worst batting average in the entire league as a team, and they added 2 of the more well-known power hitters, not only in the league and in the in the NL, but also in their division. 2 players that came from division opponents, and they have not performed. Nick Castellanos has performed well, but Mike Moustakas has not performed well at all. Jesse Winker, he's been the bright spot on this team. I mean, this team's got a .210 team batting average, and they've got a .717 team OPS. No wonder this team has struggled this season. Not to mention they've had no help from Eugenio Suarez. Eugenio Suarez has been horrendous. Joey Votto has not been good. They've had guys that, last year were performing very well. Eugenio had almost 50 home runs last year. He had 49 home runs and 100 RBIs. I told that to a friend the other day because he said something about how Eugenio is not a great baseball player, and I said, I wouldn't say that. I mean, he had 49 homers and over 100 RBIs last year, and he looked at me like I was crazy, mainly because of the year that Eugenio is having. It is clearly showing that last year and this year are a tale of two different careers for him, honestly. But if he's able to turn it around these last couple weeks, and if Moustakas can also do the same, we might have a different situation come, September 25th. So Winker is going to have to put this team on his back, though, and their pitching can really help them out a ton if they keep performing how they've done so far. Winker has struggled in the early part of September. He's only got one hit through the first 23 at-bats in the month, so that is never a good sign. Your best hitter having his worst slump of the season at the most pivotal part of the year. The pitching, like I mentioned, has been very solid, with Sonny Gray and Trevor Bauer both leading the pack, and both pitchers compiling 55 or more Ks each. Luis Castillo also has contributed 60 strikeouts himself, and TJ Antone has been a nice piece in their rotation as well with a 2.49 ERA. So the pitching is there. And now Antone hasn't pitched a ton of innings for the Reds, but when he's been on the mound, he's been effective, which will be very important for them moving forward. And really, this might be a unique case. It might not necessarily be in the hands of the hitting this year, but in contrast, it might be the pitching. And I can't believe I'm saying that because, in this offseason, I would have guessed that it was going to be the hitting that was going to take them to heights that they haven't seen in many years. But it's actually probably going to be the pitching. I mean, they've got three really strong rotation guys, and then Antone's a really nice piece as well. That's four of your five rotation guys that can really get it done and can limit teams to minimal runs. And if they can do that moving forward over the next couple games and the next couple weeks, this Reds team could start to climb their way up into the playoff conversation a little bit more. All in all, I think it will be a long shot if they make it, mainly because of the lack of hitting that they've had all year. But if they can build off of that solid pitching, and if they and they have the help from the guys on the mound that they've had so far, the hitting can fall into place. They just need their main guys to pick it up here in the next few weeks before it's too late. So a lot of different things can play out, and I could see, maybe one or two of these teams having a legitimate shot at making the playoffs if things do go their way, but it's going to take more than just a great performance from these teams. They'll need the squads that are ahead of them to start to slip up at the right time, and some of these teams in the wild card spots have not shown any, real signs of slowing down, but there is still a good bit of baseball to be played in these next few weeks, so we're going to have to see what's going to, unfold and happen in this MLB season. So that'll close things out here for us in our second segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Coming up after the commercial break, I'll discuss the future of the minor leagues, some recent news that has gone on with the MILB, and what this new development for the minors could mean for the future of these affiliate teams. Folks, it's been a lot of fun so far, but we got a lot more to go, so don't change that channel. We will be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all here still with me today. Jack Ridenauer again, and we just finished up taking a look at the wild card watchers in each league and which teams that are on the outside of the playoff picture right now that could potentially make a run at the last two wild card spots. I want to now dive into a discussion about the minor leagues and some recent news that's been going on with the minor leagues and the MILB and what it could mean for the future of minor league baseball. So as we know, the minors have started to reduce the amount of affiliates in each team's organization, with 40 teams being shut down in just a year, and not to mention the numerous players that had been cut back when the pandemic first started. So recently, the MLB has decided and has implemented this new policy where the MILB is now going to fall underneath the Major League's umbrella policy. So in a sense, what was happening before was the minor leagues were acting as almost like a third party. So it would be the major leagues, then all the teams, and then it would be the minor leagues dealing with all the affiliate teams. So it was basically three entities dealing with each other. Now the major leagues are calling this the umbrella policy, where the MILB will now fall underneath the MLB. So they're no longer going to be separate, and the MLB and the teams are now going to completely, interact with each other directly. They've moved the headquarters of the MILB from Florida to New York, and the MLB's chief of revenue will now be taking a lead role in the commercial side of things for the MILB. I think this is going to be huge for minor leagues. I know that a lot of people, and I know that they also reduced the amount of rounds for the baseball draft from 40 to now 5. So 35 rounds are gone. And if you think about it, there's a lot of guys that are taken between those 30 and 40 rounds. I know a couple minor leaguers that were taken in those 32, 33 rounds. And if you think about it, even the guys that are taken in the 8th and 9th round, they're no longer going to be possibilities of those types of players being drafted and having an opportunity to play professional baseball, because they're going to take the absolute cream of the crop, the top 5 round baseball players in the MLB draft each year. They're going to be taken first, without a doubt. And now that the MLB and the MILB are working together, I think that it could all of a sudden bring up the talent pool for the major leagues, in terms of they're going to need to start, really cracking down on some of these guys. They're going to have to start saying, okay, who do we actually need and who could we actually see benefiting our team, and who is somebody that, because right now I feel like a lot of these, low A teams, these rookie ball teams, these, advanced A teams, I never understood the point of all of those minor league teams, mainly because how many of those guys actually get out of rookie ball and make it to the majors? Or how many of those guys make it from advanced A ball and make it to the majors? If you keep it very simple, a Class A, Class AA, Class AAA, and maybe a short season team, that's it. 4 teams for each organization. Again, it will start to heighten the talent pool. They're going to have to start, being a little bit more detailed and start looking at talent with a little bit more of a critical eye. And so as a result, these teams are going to start drafting better players. They're going to start looking at players differently, because they won't have to worry about, okay, we need to have enough guys to field our, low ball A team. And a lot of these guys are probably never going to make it out of A ball. And if they do, they'll probably not get out of double A ball. So what's the point of, having these long, lengthy scouting reports on these players that, we're getting them in the 30th, 35th round, right? Instead of, okay, we've got these first 5 rounds, so if we can get 7 or 8 solid guys, that's probably a little bit too many, but, let's just keep it at, 6 players. If we can get 6 solid baseball players in 5 rounds of drafting, I think that, you're going to start seeing those first 6 guys being, the talent in the minor leagues is going to increase, because they're going to have to really look at the prospects with a little bit more of a keen eye and a little bit more of a critical eye. Now, I also think that this, could help out in terms of their business model and how they kind of go about the business aspect of it. The major leagues, they don't have... Their promotions aren't bad. A lot of teams do a great job with promotions, but some teams' promotions are not very good. The minor leagues, for whatever reason, have the best promotional evenings. They have the best promotional nights. They have the best, bring your family to the ballpark. It's, $1 beer from the, first inning to like the 6th inning or whatever it might be. They have the best deals. They've got the best promotional ideas, and they're the most creative. If the major leagues take that creativity a little bit and they start to almost reinvent and innovate their promotional nights and how they go about the entertainment aspect of fans and take a little bit from the minor leagues, then the minor leagues as a result are also going to get, their business model is going to increase, because now these major league teams are going to be able to financially back them. So it's the major leagues have the financial aspect of it, and the minor leagues have the creative, innovative side of it. And if you put those two together, I was reading an article about this, and a lot of people are very happy about this. A lot of minor league owners were very pleased about this. There was actually a lot of minor league owners that reached out to the MLB and said that they wanted to change the business model. So we could start to see a little bit of a turning of the tide for minor league teams and for major league teams. We might start seeing much more creative promotional events and evenings at ballparks whenever we can all go back to games, through the interesting thought process and the creativity of minor league teams. It's going to generate much more money for the minor league teams also, because, and again, there's pros and cons to this, right? There's going to be pros and cons to everything that you look at, but there's going to be pros and cons to this, right? The minor leagues, a lot of their money generates from concessions and in-stadium purchases. They don't get a whole bunch of money from ticket prices, right? They always have very cheap ticket sales because not many people are going to go to the games to begin with, so they have to reduce the price of their tickets to entice people a little bit more to go to the games, and then once they get them inside of the, inside the gate and inside the stadium, then they can start to, people can start paying for things, shirts, drinks, food, whatever it might be. Now, the major leagues are going to come into this with much more of a business aspect of it, right? They're going to say, hey, you have to increase your prices some. You're going to have to bring up the value of the tickets by $5, by $10, whatever it might be. Sure, the minor leagues are going to generate much more money, but is that going to make fans angry? Is that going to annoy fans? Are there going to be fans that, they might live locally where those minor league teams are, and it's been a tradition in their family to go see that team play in the stadium over the summertime because the tickets are $5 or whatever, and then all of a sudden, now you're paying $15, $20 for minor league baseball, and you're kind of like, why am I paying $20 to go watch 90% of these guys are not going to make it to the major leagues. I don't want to do that. So the idea of a cheap family fun at the minor league ballparks, that could be soured a little bit. That fun-free aspect of what minor league brings to fans could no longer be around. And it could drive people away from minor league baseball. But I think at the end of the day, the major leagues are going to put in and implement some sort of business strategy that's going to still benefit the minor leagues, right? And I go back to the promotional idea, and I think the promotions of the major leagues is going to bring up the promotions of the minor leagues, right? Because if the major leagues take a really great idea from the minor leagues and they say, okay, we want to apply this idea over into our promotional events, right? It works out. They start generating more money, and then all of a sudden the major leagues has more money. They've got more money to now share with the minor league teams and with the minor league owners, and they can now start to generate a little bit more revenue for their affiliate teams. And think about it also this way. If this happens, could we see a point where minor league baseball players start getting paid more? I've heard so many stories about minor league guys that just grind and they absolutely work their tail off, and they're making just about $4, maybe $5 an hour. I mean, some guys are making like equivalent to $2 an hour. And earlier on, when the pandemic first struck, they were just getting $400 checks every week or every 2 weeks, whatever it was. So, and again, it goes back to the minor leagues did not have enough revenue and they did not have enough money to generate to pay their guys. Now the major leagues are going to be financially supporting them a little bit more. Could they then, in part, give a little bit more money to their minor league players and to their prospects, and we start to see minor league players making a little bit more money? Now we might start to see a large number of minor league players be out of jobs in the next year. We could see an entire exodus of, minor leaguers out of baseball. We could see a total, trend change, which, again, that would be very unfortunate for a lot of guys that have put a lot of time and effort into the sport, and because of just, business, really, their opportunity and their dreams of playing professional baseball is now kind of altered a little bit. And it also makes me wonder, will we see any independent teams be scooped up by these organizations and become affiliate teams? That would be another idea that could possibly happen. I know that some of these independent teams, they do pay their their guys much more. So, and we could see minor league players that are being, kicked out and cut from these other minor league teams that are not going to be around anymore in the next year or two. They start to go to independent teams, and then we start hearing more about independent league teams. Oh, this guy, he's a top-tier prospect. He, unfortunately, did not make the cut with the Mariners or the Royals or whomever, and so he got picked up by an independent league team, and then all of a sudden we start hearing about the independent league team. So it's going to be a ripple effect, I think, in the baseball world. I think we'll hear more about independent league baseball. I think that we'll see more independent league teams get scooped up by MLB organizations, and all in all, I think that there's just going to be more money made, right? The MLB helps the MILB, the MILB helps the MLB. It's a mutually beneficial relationship that I think is going to benefit both sides for many, many years. I mean, some of these minor league teams, they had to get a paycheck protection program just to stay afloat this year. They lost so much revenue. And since most of their money, again, comes from ticket sales and mainly concessions, they weren't able to generate any sort of revenue at all. This pandemic really, quite frankly, affected everything. It affected the entire landscape of minor league baseball, and I've seen a lot of things in the news with what does the future of minor leagues hold. And, I would hate to see a day where, minor leagues is dwindled down to essentially, 2 teams or 3 teams. I love minor league baseball personally. I think it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's a new it's a different side of baseball, right? It's not the glamorous, top of the line, best players in the world type of idea. It's kids that are, and guys that are, 18, 19 years old. Some of them are 20, 25 years old. And you hear a lot of great stories about a guy that's been in the minors for 6, 7 years and he finally gets his big break and he gets called up or, whatever it might be. And so I really hope that minor league baseball doesn't ever just fizzle out, and I really don't see that happening. Potentially I could see some of these teams that decide to nix these teams, or some of these organizations in the major leagues that start to say, hey, we don't need this extra minor league team here, we don't need this extra minor league team there. They might start keeping some of those players and saying, hey, those top-tier players, we'll just house them down in our spring training facility, we'll pay them, and they'll just basically work out. And if some guy on the single-A or double-A or triple-A team gets injured, then we'll just call them up, and they'll just basically be a replacement team, which I think could possibly work. I think that would be an all right idea for some guys. I think that, it would defeat the possibility of somebody having their dreams being washed away due to a business decision, right? And again, this decision, I think that to have MILB fall underneath the policy of MLB, it was met with positive responses. It was met with a good good response from the other owners in the minor leagues. Now, there obviously were minor league owners that said, hey, we've been doing this for over 100 years. This has been rolling for a long, long time. Why do we need to change this? What is the point of that? But if it comes down to financial backing, and if you can't make your bottom line on a yearly basis, basically because of, small ticket prices and, minimal concession and in-stadium purchases, now you mix in this pandemic and it set everything back 2 or 3 steps. So it's going to do a lot of things. And I think that overall, this will be a mutually beneficial relationship where both sides will benefit from it. And I think that in the long run, we're going to see a lot of, we could even see players starting to develop a little bit more. And I know that I said that you're going to have teams find the cream of the crop talent and are going to really weed out any sort of lesser baseball players. So it's going to heighten the talent pool and the overall playing of minor league baseball. I think at the same time it's going to elevate the scouting and the evaluation of these players that these organizations will go through, because they will be able to focus on certain players. They'll be able to develop certain players a little bit more. So you'll start to see guys that develop much better in certain systems, as opposed to guys that kind of get left by the wayside in a low A or a rookie ball team that nobody ever hears about, and then in 2 years they fizzle out, and that's that. So I think all in all, it's going to benefit both sides. I think that we're going to see a positive outcome from this, and I think that in the end, the minor leagues will be saved, and there won't be any more, worry of, hey, are we going to make our bottom line this year on rainout days, or on days that there's no off games, or on the days where there's off games? Are we going to have to turn our field into a drive-in movie theater that I saw a lot of teams do come pandemic time? You can't do that all the time, right? You can't be a legitimate operating organization and have to use kind of a side outlet to keep your bottom line afloat and to keep your revenue up above, the positive. So I think that the major leagues are going to do a great job with the minor leagues, and I think the minor leagues are going to bring a little bit of a creative and innovative style to Major League Baseball, and I think that might enhance the overall experience at a ball game, and I think that it will make games much more enjoyable for fans as a result with that kind of MILB and that minor league feel at a major league game. I think it's going to make things very unique in baseball. So that'll do it for this segment, folks. Thanks again for sticking around, but stay right there because we'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment today, which will include my most underrated players in the majors and who I think should get much more attention than they do currently. Don't go anywhere, everyone, because we have one last segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup final.
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for the final segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer is still with you, and in the last segment I talked about the future of the minor leagues and how their newfound partnership with the majors could help both the MLB and the MILB in the long run. To wrap up today, I want to discuss the most underrated players in the league this season and who should be given much more attention than they get currently. There are a lot of players, I feel, that do not have the proper notoriety they deserve, mainly because of the teams they play for, or there are other players on the team that get more attention for whatever reason. But I wanted to highlight those who don't usually get the recognition they should. So I'll start it off with the Kansas City Royals second baseman and outfielder, Whit Merrifield. And to the life of me, I don't understand why this guy is not talked about more. He might be having a down year this year in terms of how he's performed in the past, but do not let that fool you, because up until recently he had been hitting well above 300, hitting at the most 400 this year at one point. Merrifield is a very consistent hitter that has solid power hitting numbers. They're not great, but he is so consistent from the plate that, you kind of forget about his power numbers. A 2019 All-Star, Merrifield has led the league in hits in each of the last two seasons with 206 last year and 192 the year before. He has also never hit below 280 in his career, with this year actually being the lowest average he has had since his rookie year in 2016. Now, he is in his 30s, 31 to be exact, but I do not really look at age all that much until a guy approaches his mid to late 30s. With how baseball is these days, we are starting to see guys peak in their 30s as opposed to their mid to late 20s. So Merrifield clearly has a few years left in him, and he's hitting .253 this year with a .746 OPS. Merrifield has not been hitting well as of late, going .435 to start the month of September, but his career numbers have been very impressive with 2 straight years of hitting above 300, and not to mention, he is a major threat on the base path, leading the league in stolen bases in 2018 with 45 and leading the AL in stolen bases in 2017 with 34. It's clear he is a multifaceted player that can do a lot of different things for the Royals. It's unfortunate, though, that he is in Kansas City because they are not all that talked about very much, and they have the worst record in the AL Central. I mean, if this was a player on, say, the Cubs or the Dodgers, I think we would hear much more about Merrifield constantly, actually. I think we'd hear about him constantly. But because of the team he plays on, there is never much said about him, which I think is ridiculous. I mean, the guy puts up incredible numbers. He could be a consistent all-star for the next couple years. I really believe that, especially with his hitting numbers and his ability from the plate. I think that he's a very well-rounded baseball player, not to mention, like I said, he's great on the base path. And with the way baseball is today, if you've got a guy that's able to hit, get on base, and then is able to move over on the base path, that right there, that's fine enough, a needle in the haystack, really, that you don't see that very often, because it's a guy that's able to not only produce a lot of offense, but he's also able to set himself up in a position to have that offense produced, right? So he's able to set up his teammates to score runs, which is always a key thing to have. Leading the majors in hits the last 2 years, and in stolen bases one of those years, it's clear Merrifield is picking up steam just at the right time. Maybe we will eventually see him land on another high-profile team that he could get a little bit more recognition, which I think he deserves. So we'll see if, kind of what the future holds for Whit Merrifield, but keep an eye on that guy because I think he's going to be very good for many years to come. Next player, Minnesota Twins shortstop Jorge Polanco. Now, this is a player that is on a high-profile team, at least much more high-profile than the Royals, and I still don't understand why we don't hear more about him. Coming off an all-star year like Merrifield, Polanco hit 22 homers and knocked in 79 runs last year with a .295 average. That was around .330 for most of the year last year. This year, he's still hitting a solid percentage from the plate, .284 with 18 RBIs. But like Witt, he does not have great power numbers, only a 95 OPS plus and a .395 slugging average. It is clear Polanco is more of a slap hitter than anything, but again, there's nothing wrong with that because he's still able to get on base and set his teammates up to score those runs. He's been a quiet top 5 hitter on the Twins this year, and hardly anyone pays attention to him, mainly because he is overshadowed a little bit by the hitting prowess of Nelson Cruz. His WAR last year was nearly 5, right at 4.8 to be exact, so a very, very important part of his team without a doubt. Although he doesn't have crazy home run numbers or big power numbers like Cruz, he is very similar to Witt in the sense that he is consistent and gets the job done at a very high level. His fielding does need to sharpen up a little bit. I mean, he had 22 errors over at short last year, but he does get a lot of action in the middle infield with over 500 chances in the field, and he still compiled a 95 fielding percentage. So he's a very good fielder, but he still needs to keep those errors down, especially if he is very active defensively and has a lot of action coming his way. I mean, this Twins team, if they want to be the top-tier team that they are capable of being and that they've been for the last 2-3 years, it's going to really, kind of a forgotten trait's going to be the fielding. And I think Jorge Polanco could be a huge part of their success, especially with him in the middle infield. He leads the AL in singles this year with 36, and the fielding has been much better this year. He is third in the AL in fielding percentage, so a very solid all-around player who, if he is able to tighten that fielding up even more and bring some of those power numbers up, we will be hearing a lot more about Jorge Polanco in future seasons. Next guy, a teammate actually of Polanco's, that is Minnesota Twins pitcher Randy Dobnak, and I have become a huge fan of Randy's this year because he's a quiet, kind of, doesn't have any, wild, crazy attributes to him. He's not wildly, he doesn't have great height. He doesn't have, long arms. He's not like a guy like Glasnow, who's got this really long reach and he's able to reach far out, minimizes the amount of time that a hitter has to react to a pitch. He's just such a solid, efficient pitcher. 2 years in the league, and the guy has been stellar in the action he has seen on the mound. In 5 starts last year, he has a 2-1 record with a 1.59 ERA in 28 1/3 innings. And then this year, he is 6-3 through 9 starts with a 3.61 ERA and 23 Ks, which was his season total last year. So it's clear that Dobnak is starting to come into his own as a pitcher for the Twins. Although he isn't a huge strikeout guy, he is still doing a phenomenal job at holding teams to as few of runs as possible, and with only 12 walks and 42 innings of work, he has shown that he has good command as well, but he does struggle against lefties. That is a very well documented thing. With a .217 average against righties, that number skyrockets. Absolutely skyrockets to .316 when he faces off against lefties, and he seems to struggle on the road as well, as his average against an opponent ballparks is .302. As opposed to at home, which is 189. So clearly a dominating pitcher at home and against righties, but he needs to improve those splits against lefties and on the road to make him, much more rounded as a pitcher. And to the point where he can be, a clear-cut ace on this team. And I mentioned this in the first segment. Jose Barrios is said to be the ace for Minnesota. But with over a 4 ERA, I honestly would take Dobnak in this situation, mainly because he is consistent and his command is much better. Again, although Dobnak is second on the team in walks, he has 10 fewer than Barrios, who leads the team with 22. So if Dobnak can improve his pitching against against lefties and start really, stretching out his outings from 4 to 5 innings to 6 to 7 more consistently. He's only got one game this year where he has gone 6 innings. So it's clear that he does not necessarily get a whole lot of reps out on the mound, but he's moving through innings efficiently. He's getting through guys, and he's registering wins. And again, the hitting is also helping him out a lot in those situations. But the Twins have a legit ace on their hands, and they could improve their case for being one of the top teams in the entire league if Dobnak continues to play the way he's played, and potentially it could start to push Berrios into playing better if he starts to see his position as an ace slip a little bit to Randy Dobnak. The next player, I again briefly mentioned him in the first segment. I want to talk about him much more now in the last segment. San Diego Padres pitcher Dinelson Lamet. And honestly, I feel like not many people know who this guy is, especially being on the Padres. I'm sure it's hard for him to get any attention. I'm sure it's hard for really any pitcher to get any attention on that team with the incredible hitting they have. Unless you are Mike Clevenger, then you will be talked about a lot. But Lamet has been, quietly dominating this year with San Diego. He's got a 2.24 ERA in 52 and a third innings of pitching. Lamet has been a force to be reckoned with from the mound. He leads the Padres with 68 Ks, and he's second on the team in ERA, so it's clear that Nelson has had a lot to do with their impressive 2020 year. This is a player that has improved every year in the majors as well, starting with a 4.57 ERA in 2017 to a 4.07 ERA last year to a below 2.5 ERA this year. I mean, it's an incredible improvement. He just keeps getting better and better. And in just 3 years, I mean, imagine what he's going to be like in 5 years, in 6 years, and in hopefully he can play 10 years. And if he's that good in 10 years, we're going to start having a conversation of he's going to be one of the top pitchers in the NL. And because of the star-studded lineup they have and the recent acquirement of Clevenger, Lamet doesn't get a whole lot of love, unfortunately. But he should, because with 194 ERA plus and only 5 home runs surrendered by the 28-year-old this year, it is very clear that his pitching is vital to this team's success. Call me crazy, but I think it's the pitching that is going to help elevate their level of play come playoff time. I really believe that. I mean, the hitting will get them into the playoffs, but once the playoffs are figured out and we're in the midst of it, I think San Diego's pitching is going to need, it's going to have to do much more than what they've been. I mean, they've been great all year, but they're going to have to really step it up even more because the hitting isn't going to go anywhere, right? The hitting is going to stay there. It's going to be a matter of can the pitching come out and perform on the biggest stage, and can they advance far into the playoffs? This will be the first time they've been to the playoffs since 2006. So they're going to need everything and more from their pitching staff to stay in the playoffs and really make this World Series run, which a lot of people believe they can do. With a top 10 ERA in the entire league and top 10 in strikeouts, it's a head-scratcher as to how we have not heard more about Lamet, who I think, honestly, could be a serious Cy Young contender in the NL. I mean, he is third in strikeouts and top 10 in ERA. So someone who will, he'll make a legitimate case for the award, especially with how good San Diego is this year. There will be votes for Lamet, and I hope he wins the NL Cy Young, honestly. I think he has the talent and the numbers to back the claim. So don't be shocked if you see his name being announced as the winner of the award. It's going to be really fascinating to see if he does come out as the NL Cy Young Award winner. He's going to have his hands full because Jacob deGrom is making a case for winning it for the third straight year, and Yu Darvish has also been pitching lights out for the Cubs. So I think it's going to be between those three. I think we're going to have a little three-way race. Maybe Max Fried makes a little bit of noise in that, a little four-way race, but I think Lamet is going to be somebody that is right on the cusp of winning the Cy Young this year. Next player, sticking in the NL West, actually, San Francisco Giants second baseman Donovan Solano. Now, he's the oldest player on this list by only a year. The 32-year-old second baseman has found a second life in his career. With 2 straight years of hitting 300 or higher, it shows that Solano should be deserving of more attention, especially with how much improvement he has seen in his career from hitting just 227, 4 years ago, and not even being in the MLB in 2017 and 2018. Solano has risen as one of the best hitters in the NL that you never have heard about. Batting .353 this season with a .931 OPS and 27 runs batted in, it shows that both the contact and the power numbers are there for Solano, as he has 14 doubles this year, and he's a low strikeout guy with only 25 Ks and 136 at-bats. His OPS plus is also through the roof at 154, and this is starting to turn into a career year for Solano. And honestly, if I have ever seen a legitimate case for most improved player in the MLB, it would be Solano. Just the sheer turnaround in numbers, it's incredible. It's purely incredible. He isn't a huge home run hitter. That's the one thing that I have always made note of and always have noticed about him. He's not a big home run guy. He's only got 3 on the year this season, but he also generates a lot of runs for his team, and he produces a ton of offense for them. And this year, his offensive production has been much needed with the Giants right now flirting with a playoff run. They are hovering around that 500 mark and have seen a steady improvement on the year, especially with the Rockies starting to slip up a little bit. But as we get closer to October, look to see Solano kick things into high gear and try to get their playoff chances a little bit higher than they are right now. So my final player, one of my most underrated players in all of Major League Baseball, somebody that I was actually having this conversation with a few friends of mine the other day, and this name was thrown out. And so I looked him up, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I've never heard of him. And again, another Kansas City Royal guy, and I really feel bad for anybody that's on the Royals because you just don't get the notoriety you deserve. You could be hitting .330 for an entire season, and nobody would hear about you because you're on the Royals. But if you're hitting .330 and you're on the Dodgers, you're going to probably never be you're going to never not hear your name, right? So it's again, a lot of it boils down to what team and what market you're on as a baseball player. Kansas City Royals right fielder and designated hitter Jorge Soler. Jorge Soler is another head scratcher to me as to why he is never talked about, or at least not talked about enough. Soler he led the AL in home runs last year with 48 home runs. Yes. I can't believe it myself. I mean, it's like Eugenio Suarez. I couldn't believe he hit 49 home runs last year. He'd be another guy that would be on the underrated list for me as well. He had a 922 OPS last year with a 138 OPS plus, so someone who is clearly a power hitter. And, for this otherwise lackluster lineup Kansas City has, this is the second Royals player we have heard about. And similar to Witt, I think if Soler was on another team, we would hear and we would be talking about him much more, especially with the numbers he's capable of putting up. He did lead the AL in strikeouts last year with 178, so that is a cause of concern. But a guy that goes up to the plate with the intent of driving in runs and getting guys to score, that's a very good thing. That's a very, very vital thing to have, especially if you're a team like the Royals, whose offense is not great. So if you can hold on to him for as long as you can, same thing with Merrifield, and maybe add another piece or two and try and bring some people up through the organization, we could start to see the Royals maybe return to not necessarily the form that they were in 2014 and 2015, but at least winning, in a regular season game, or in regular season, and a normal season, that is, winning 80 games, winning 85 games. I think that would be a very achievable thing for the Royals to do in a normal 162 game season. With 117 RBIs last year, Soler proved he can be a big run producing player for his team. And with him putting up numbers like that in his late 20s, it really makes me wonder what kind of player we are going to see once he hits his early 30s like Merrifield. His WAR was exceptional last year at nearly 4, but has dipped down to a 0.2 this year. Clearly, he's not hitting the way he was last year. I mean, he's only hitting 235, and with a 787 OPS, it's definitely a little bit of a down year for him. But the fact that he has not, or the fact that we have not heard anything really about him, and he hit almost 50 bombs last year, that's insane, in my opinion. Usually you would hear everything and more about a guy. I mean, you heard everything and more about Pete Alonso. Now, he was a rookie and he was on a New York team, so that makes a lot more sense. But a guy that is hitting 48 homers and he's leading the AL in home runs, I mean, talk about a guy that is not heard much about at all. And especially if it's a guy that's leading an entire league in home runs, you would think that you would hear his name constantly. He is listed as a right fielder and a DH, and honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if this, if and when this universal DH position stays, that he maybe leaves Kansas City after this 1-year deal is up and he goes to an NL team that allows him to focus on hitting as opposed to both hitting and fielding. And we've already seen what happens when you take a power hitter out of the field and place them as strictly a DH. They start to see their numbers take off, as we've seen with Jesse Winker this year and Marcell Ozuna, two players who have been playing well in more of a DH-oriented role. And as Soler continues to improve, look to see his career really take off, and in a few years, he could be one of the top power hitters in the league, which he is capable of doing that and much more. So there are just a few guys I feel that are almost forgotten about in baseball, but they have the opportunity and the ability to be talked about much more if they find themselves on the right team, or if their team starts to play at a high level. We will see and hear much more about them. I really do hope that we can, find out and hear much more about these guys, because they deserve the notoriety for the way that they've been playing, not only this year, but in previous years as well. So that'll wrap it up here for us today on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice little review. That really helps us. We're always open to any and all feedback. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on any new updates and stuff coming out, whether it's episodes, content, or news. Love to keep you all clued in. Again, everyone, thanks so much for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, and until next time, have a great day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.